Welcome to class. I hope you enjoyed building Palm. We're here in week 5 and we're going to learn a few things in week 5. I'm going to show you how to use the mouse to control things on the canvas. Scott's going to talk a bit more about lists and kind of work on how you might use lists to control multiple objects on the screen. I'm going to finish things off by talking about images, and then you'll work on a fairly straightforward mini project this week based on the card game memory. So before I go there, I have a kind of a quick little piece of advice about gaming, and then I'll just give you a really long kind of walkthrough of building an application using mouse input. See you in a sec. Now, if you play enough video games, you're going to lose. So as part of my tip to you, here are 3 excuses you can use whenever you lose at a video game. First excuse, I lagged. I was watching a raid in World of Warcraft once and watched 25 people charge into the battle and 1 person stand there. And everybody else died because of this. And afterwards they're like, why did you just stand there? The player's like, I lagged. There was a thunderstorm in my area. My network was bad. And lag. Good excuse. Another excuse that actually I think is funny is I'll hear people say, wait a second, my mom distracted me. That was why I didn't do anything. Well, look, probably don't want to use that one unless you're in middle school. You want everybody to think you're in middle school. And the last one, and this again is a classic, is I got hacked. You hacked me. That's why I lost. So here's my official excuse for losing at Palm. Rainbows and unicorns, Scott? I got hacked. Let's go to class. All right, let's build an example of using the mouse to interact with the canvas. The application that I'm going to build is fairly straightforward. I'm going to build an application where if I click on the canvas, we'll draw a red circle centered where I've clicked. Every time I click in a new location, the old circle will disappear and we'll draw a new circle there. So we're going to have 1 circle on the canvas at any time. Then I'm going to extend this so that if I click on an existing circle, the color will change to green. Kind of doing in preparation to what Scott's going to do later in the week, where he's going to show you how to actually put down lots of circles using lists. And then if you would like to select one, you can use kind of the same technique I'm going to show you here to select a particular circle. So this is going to be kind of leading up to using mouse clicks to do selection. I'm going to shoot this all in one take, so I may make a few mistakes as I go. That's fine. We'll work through them. You kind of see my thought processes in action as we go through and build our example. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do if we want to use the mouse is we actually have to understand what functions we need to call to make it work. So let's go out here and go to the docs. And we'll go over to Simple GUI, and we're going to have, let's see, a control object. And what are we going to have? We're going to have mouse clicks here. So what we can see here is that there's going to be one function here, set mouse click handler, that lets us register the event handler for a mouse click. More importantly, here's what our handler has to look like for a mouse click. So it's going to be function. It's going to take a parameter. What's that parameter? That parameter is a pair of numbers. It's the position and canvas coordinates where we just click. And so I want to point your attention to one thing here. This is actually a tuple of 2 integers. Okay, it's not a list. It's actually a tuple. So that means it's immutable. Think about tuples. Remember, they're immutable lists. So we're going to actually kind of anticipate that when we're building our handler here, we're going to look back at that particular issue. So we're going to need to go through and add in statements of this form, a statement of this form, and then figure out what we need to really do. All right, let's go back to our code and see if we can kind of start building it. So here I've got a stub. It actually has a lot of things already implemented for us. I have the height and the width of the canvas. I've got a variable that's the position of the circle. I've got its color. I've got a fixed radius. I've got a draw handler with a stub here, and then I've got some simple GUI calls to create a canvas with a white background. So let's go through and first just get it drawing a circle in the center of the canvas. So one thing to see in this example is I'm not going to write all my code and then try to debug it. I'm going to write a little bit, debug it, write a little bit, debug it. That way, that if something breaks, I kind of have a good idea where things broke. It's where I made that last change. So let's get this, take this statement right here. We're going to go and we're going to do the following. Let's say canvas dot draw circle. What do we need to do? We need to draw it. We need to draw it at the ball position, and we need to use the ball radius. And let's see, what is the next parameter? Next parameter, I think, is the width of the outline of it. So let's make that 1, and then the This is the color of the outline of the circle. And then the last thing we need to add is we actually need to add what we're going to fill the circle with. That's going to be its color. And we actually we want to put red in there, but we already got a variable called ball color. So we're going to use that because later on we're going to actually modify it. So we can say ball color. And that looks pretty good. Let's run that and see if we've got it going. So there we go. We actually have drawn a kind of a red circle in the middle of the canvas. So now we like to modify this. So if I click someplace else on the canvas, we draw the circle wherever we clicked. Well, let's see if we can do that. So what are we going to need to do? We need to go through and do two things. We need to create a mouse handler. We need to register it. So registering it is easy. I've already actually got the statement in here to register it. Set mouse click handler. The callback is click. So we need to go through now and define a handler here, which whenever we click is going to set ball position to be whatever the position was where we clicked. So let's see. Well, we could say something like ball position is equal to position. Now, I made a big deal when I looked at the definition of what a mouse handler looked like to point out that that was actually a tuple. So remember, tuples can't be modified. So I'm going to be a little safe here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to observe that if this is a tuple and I do this assignment, what's going to happen is ball position is going to be a reference to that tuple. Now in this example, I'm never going to modify a piece of ball position. But in subsequent examples, subsequent programs, you may want to go through and modify a little piece of where ball position is. If this points to a tuple, you're going to throw an error. So I'm going to make a simple suggestion. You'll do this occasionally whenever you want to solve reference issues. If you're worried about a reference issue, we can simply say list of position. What does that do? That makes a new copy of that tuple. Now it's going to be a list. That's why we call it list. And now we can set ball position to be that. That will give us something that we could then modify at a later date. So if reference issues confuse you sometimes, remember list is your friend. You can make a copy of things so you can modify one but not the other. All right, we need to do one more thing here. Ball position is going to be a global variable. So what do we need to do? We need to say global ball position. All right, so we made a copy of it and we've set it to be global. Let's give it a run. I think this is going to work. Not too hard. Okay, so I click, it gives me the position, I make a copy of it, I cite it to ball position. Now, inside the draw handler, we use the updated ball position whenever we're drawing. All right, what was the next thing we wanted to do? We wanted to add some functionality that allowed us to change the color of the ball if we clicked inside the circle. All right, so how can we tell if we're clicking close to the previous position we've clicked? Well, ball position contains that position. So when we get the new position, we need to check to see if the distance between the new and the old positions is less than the radius of the ball. So I've got a helper function here that I'm going to use. You'll use this in other examples. I'm going to write a helper function that computes the distance between 2 points in canvas coordinates. Now you actually should know how to do this. We talked about this, for example, when we did collisions and reflections. Let's see, what do we need to do? We need to take the square root. This actually comes from the Pythagorean theorem. The square root of what? The sum of the squares of the legs of a right triangle. So kind of we need to think about this, that we're computing a distance between 2 points. That's the hypotenuse of a right triangle. The difference in the horizontal direction is one leg. The difference in the vertical direction is the other leg. So to do that, let's see, we're going to need to do something where we take the square of the length of the horizontal leg plus the square of the length of the vertical leg, and now we need to get the length of those legs. So how can we do that? See, P0 minus Q0, and that's going to be the length in the horizontal direction. Now we need to have the length in the vertical direction. All right, so that helper function now gives us a distance. Okay, so now we could use that helper function down here inside click. So now we're going to modify click to do one of two things. If the new click is close to the old click, we just change the color. Otherwise, we update the position. So we're going to need to add a test here of the form. If the distance, let's see, between the position and the ball position, What's that going to have to be less than the ball radius? What do we need to do? Well, we need to go through and update the color. If we click inside the old position of the old ball, the old circle, we should change the color to be green. So we're going to need to say ball color equal to green. Well, else, what should we do? Well, we could go through now and update the position. So let's see. Let's try that. Oh, I see an issue here. We want to update ball color. Ball color is a global variable, so we better define it a global. Now, I know there's one more issue, but we're going to just run it, and we'll see what the issue here is in just a second. So let's try that and see what happens. Okay, working good, working good, working good. All right, now let's click inside it and see if it changes green. Excellent. All right, click inside, it stays green. What happens if I click over here? Oh, it made a new circle, but it colored it green. Now that's probably that's not what we want to do if we're trying to actually make this mimic selection. If we click someplace else, it probably should unselect the previous ball that was green, the previous circle that was green. So what we should do is add one more statement here, which is something maybe of the form ball color equal red. And now when we create that new circle, it'll have a new position and it'll go back to being red. So let's run that. Looks good. Click in there, it's green. Click there, it's red. Click there. All right, so we've got something that's kind of close to the functionality we're going to need if we're going to do selection with a bunch of circles. Scott will talk about that in a couple of lectures. So building something that uses a mouse is really easy. Okay? Go look at the docs. There are also more examples out there on the web. We've got plenty of examples and concept of examples. Take a look at them. I think it'll help you understand what's going on. Okay, I'll be back in a little while and we'll talk about images.